With very few exceptions, there are just no women who will remain loyal until the end. Every guy is aware of this. Nevertheless, only one is concerned, another tolerates it, and the third makes every effort to ignore it. For 40 years, my wife and I shared a home. When I was 20 and she was 19, we were married. We have a wide variety of items. We had a fight and reconciled. But I was certain that we had never deceived one another at that period. Nevertheless, she was there for me wherever fate sent me. Paul, our son, and Katya, our daughter, are both incredibly lovely. Now that they are both adults, they both have families and their own children. I had no doubt that we would enjoy our golden years in the company of our cherished grandkids. I am a physician. I was in the Army for 25 years, retired after 10 years of retirement, and attained the rank of colonel in the medical branch. Retired is a harsh term, to be sure. I've been working at a private clinic ever since. Although I don't often use a scalpel because of my advanced age, I nevertheless keep medical care in mind. Nastya, as my wife is also known, is still employed, although at an advertising agency. She has a background in design. Would you think that our financial situation was problematic? No. We only engaged in work that we enjoyed. In my professional life, I've traveled much. I spent over a year traveling through Mongolia, Vietnam, and Africa. True, I hardly visited these nations. I worked nearly 24 hours a day as a doctor, not to mention in the military. Then the hot spots of the imploding Soviet Union appeared. But I always knew that my devoted wife and kids were waiting for me when I got home. I certainly thought so. But that was only wishful thinking, as it proved out. My wife kept her inherent attractiveness throughout her aging process. Because she'd always taken good care of herself, she was able to keep her girly appearance. Moreover, a face devoid of any wrinkles. She was misidentified as my young mistress while we strolled side by side. An older, gray-haired guy and a young, blonde woman made for an uncomfortable contrast. A father and his child mistress. This contrast really delighted Nastya. It also made me feel flattering, but it turned out that I was enjoying myself pointlessly. One wet evening in November, everything occurred. Have you ever observed that the things that adversely affect our life tend to occur on soggy autumn nights? It is as though the earth is attempting to draw us down with it as it dies. Fall was nearly over. On the window pane, a chilly spring breeze was scattering cold fall raindrops, changing them into trickles that were descending the slopes. I looked through my paperwork at the kitchen table in search of my medical records. On Monday, I had an appointment at the clinic for a checkup, so I needed to locate my immunization record. Nastya had left the house that afternoon to go grocery shopping and prepare Sunday supper for us, so she wasn't at home. I spent a lot of time looking through old papers. Some of the certificates had become yellow with age, and then all of a sudden, I discovered something that truly astonished me. It was a passage taken from my wife's medical file. It was from a time when I had spent nearly a year away from home on a protracted work trip. My daughter had been born 4 years earlier. The announcement discussed Nastya's pregnancy and untimely delivery. Outcomes of tests and ultrasounds. Nastya had a preterm 6-month-old kid at the time, it turned out. In 3 days, he passed away. The testing on her and the infant followed. Rhesus factor, blood type, and so on. The newborn thus had blood type 3 and was R negative. I seemed as though at least a closet had fallen on me because of how I was in. I could not possibly be the baby's father. I have blood type B and Nastya has R positivity. As a result, only type A and positive rhesus blood could be given to our infant. And finally, since I was just outside the nation at the time, the baby could not have been mine at birth. I spent a long time looking at the discharge certificate in silence because I was unable to organize my thoughts. Nastya hasn't been loyal to me. She was able to become pregnant and nearly give birth while I was away from home. But who exactly? I was certain that I have a solid family, a devoted wife, and a bright future a half hour ago. There was now nothing but destruction behind me. I was able to gather myself at last. The certificate was neatly reinserted, and my briefcase contained the excerpt I had discovered. The most important thing is to relax. Avoid agitating the fever. It is a well-established truth that Nastya cheated on me. Since his wife had just returned, I was genuinely eager for a fight. However, I needed to organize things first. Where it was obvious was with the kids. 9 years separated them. Blood type O was shared by Pavel and Katya, and therefore it was clear that they belonged to me. Both resembled me when we were little, to the extent that children may resemble their father. I knew I was their father. I had no reservations. However, the idea did not improve my mood. I was unable to comprehend why she had treated me in this way. We were hitched out of love. I had almost a year to court her. Despite my stunning look and the fact that the attention of the opposite sex was not withheld, other ladies did not exist for me. However, my Nastya was the only lady I had ever known in my whole life. I attempted to provide my wife love and care during our whole relationship. I used to think I had no other single existence at times. To me, my wife represented everything and more. And after that, my chest hurt. I stepped outside onto the balcony to get some fresh air. In the faint light of a flickering street lamp, I noticed a vehicle drive up at our door as I looked down. My wife eventually exited the vehicle, and a male soon after her. He removed some parcels after opening the rear door. Nastya gave him a short kiss on the cheek before grabbing the items and entering the building. The automobile backed out of the yard when the man sat down in the driver's seat. Yes, the more the merrier the further away. The lock on the front door clicked. "Are you at home, Yura?" The moment my wife's voice became audibly loud, I recognized I could no longer bear it and decided to immediately begin outlining our relationship. Went to see Marinka to chat to those who had been cured. Nastya's voice lacked any feeling. "Well, a lot of time has passed. Let me prepare something quickly. Why are you being so pouty?" As she kissed my cheek, I caught a whiff of alcohol. "We drank some champagne with Marinka, so don't wrinkle your nose." She removed my cheek's lipstick with a wipe. "She provided you with a ride, then?" I made every effort to talk softly. Nastya gave me an odd look as she turned to face me. She was obviously unsure of how to respond to me. "Please don't overreact to that, Yura. I took a cab there, or rather, a friend drove me." My wife was searching hard for the correct response. "What is the issue? If you kissed him goodbye, you must have been a really close friend." I believe the neighbors could hear the rapid beating of my heart. I got up and took the entire bottle of whiskey out of the cupboard to pass the time and help me relax. Nastya gave me a terrified expression. "Why do you know that?" "On the balcony, I watched you bid the driver farewell. I had to work so hard to maintain my composure and refrain from yelling. The price includes the kiss as well. Or did it? Yura? What is Yura?" "I made a whiskey for myself. I want to ask you some questions, so please sit down." I retrieved a stool from underneath the table and removed the unfortunate extract from it. "Nastya, describe what it is." I put the paper in my wife's line of sight. She hurriedly jerked her fingers away after carefully turning a few pages. "How did it get here?" Nastya raised her eyes to me as she started crying. "You read it, right? Who gave birth to you, Nastya? What took place?" I accepted the glass but refrained from drinking. She remained silent for a time before speaking at once in a surprisingly calm tone. "It had to happen at some point, and perhaps it's even better that it did now." She informed me in a steady, calm voice that she had met a young man and fallen in love with during my extremely lengthy absence, which she stressed. He was younger by 11 years. She was powerless to stop herself. It was like an addiction. He moved in with her in our apartment after she initially rushed to him for a date. Then she took the kids to her mother's. They began acting like a married couple. She became pregnant as a result of their extraterrestrial love sessions, and he proposed to her. My 2 children's mother, a married lady, was introduced to her. She even secretly hoped that I wouldn't return at all, so that everything would calm down on its own in a fit of love. They were going to wed and live together. The baby was delivered early and passed away 3 days later, so it didn't work out. At this time, she started crying. She didn't seem to give a damn about the other kids as far as I could tell. She claimed that after the baby passed away, their bond deteriorated and they became distant from one another. When a young woman came into view, her partner abruptly broke up their relationship in favor of seeking out other experiences. Nastya took the kids and waited for me after some time of anxiety. She greeted me when I got back as if nothing had occurred. She faithfully performed the duties of a loving and caring wife throughout the ensuing years. I felt stunned. To be honest, I temporarily lost all capacity to thought or talk. I remained silent while I regarded the wall, and not a single idea entered my mind. I simply stood there and remained still. But it didn't end there. A dear friend of hers visited our city 6 months ago. It became out that she had loved him all these years as the passion erupted with newfound ferocity. My wife then collapsed into his arms like a ripe plum in muck. They had been dating for a while, but now that she wants to start a new life without me, it's unfortunate. She spent 40 years of her life with me, giving me her best years, and now that her children are adults, she wants a new beginning with the person she loves. She was saying all of this while well aware that every word she was using was killing me. She briefly reminded me of an executioner going about his business carelessly. It's not personal. It happens out of love. I'm done now. You can sigh and sip. What took place next? I poured the whiskey once more, then downed it quickly. It's an odd beverage. It does absolutely nothing to help me. Maybe I'm just worn out. I grasped the bottle and regarded the illumination. No, it didn't seem bad. Like an old Irish whiskey should be, light brown. I should just pour more of it, I see. What exactly am I doing? Alternatively, you could just pour it directly from the neck. Have you ever noticed that a decent whiskey bottle has a wide, convenient neck that resembles a decanter? I'll tell you, it's quite useful. Practically no glass is required. Nastya was silent as she sat across from me. I even fretted. Ran out of kerosene, or perhaps something happened. She had such clear, effective speech. A good girl. She has defrauded me for a long time. I probably would not have known if I hadn't come across the sentence. You did a true hereditary woman proud. What exactly does it happen mean? It's not a huge issue. It occurs, of course. That's all that occurs. You ought to shut the window. It's chilly. I rose from the stool, kicked it, and entered the bedroom. I put on some clothes, packed a few items in my bag, and then quietly made my way out the door. You are under no obligation to spend the night out. I gave her a glance. She stood out against the kitchen doorway with her black shadow. Don't you think you should tell me something? I think she's going to start crying. Poor thing was so anxious. I shook my head and went out, being careful not to bang my horns on the doorframe. Outside, autumn was waiting for me. I took a deep breath of the wet air and put my backpack over my shoulder before carefully pacing myself along the pavement that was covered in yellow leaves. I was desperate for a smoke. In case, I even checked my pockets. Naturally, I was unable to locate anything because I had quit smoking 20 years prior at Nastya's request. She was genuinely worried about my well-being and future. The metropolis was attempting to forget itself in a restless sleep because it was so late. Only the streetlights cast a dull light on the mostly empty streets, and the windows of the homes were dimly lighted. The phone chirped. Concerned for her spouse, Nastya. The phone was off when I pushed the off button. I suddenly had such a desire that I had to clamp my teeth to the collar of my coat in order to control my sobbing. I didn't know what had transpired until just now. In an effort to stop the ideas from killing me, I even shook my head. Now what? To where? Slamming the door and walking out with my head up high was the easiest course of action. Then where? The children? They already have enough issues. I probably didn't need a mistress, but I never had one. Just for labor, as in for duty. I would think about it all night, and then the next day I would decide. I moved carefully past the dark dwellings, being careful not to trip over any damp leaves. Hello, guy. Do you smoke? I whirled around and sank into the night. The intense brightness pierced my eyeballs like a SWAT team into a raspberry robbery. Well, at last. The voice of a man speaking nearby said. I had trouble getting my head to turn. Hello, Yuri Ivanovich. Welcome back. My boss glanced at me while still showing his excitement. Who am I? I had a hard time saying the words. You are in our clinic, yes. Last night, you were brought to the emergency hospital due to a head injury. They phoned us when you still had your paperwork with you. We immediately operated on you after picking you up. You are back with us after the surgery went well. We informed your wife and kids. Your kid is traveling. The detective promised to show there in the afternoon. Do I have a wife, you ask? My heart aches once more as a result of recent occurrences. Wife. There was no longer a wife for me. The room's door squeaked open. Hi, Daddy. What mood are you in? Paul, my kid, gave me a cheek kiss. You frightened us. He placed a suitcase on the nightstand with care. Please enjoy these fruit and juice. Nothing else is permitted just now. My blanket was altered by Paul. Mum couldn't yet since she had an essential matter to attend to. She is not required to come. Ok, but don't be concerned. It appears that Pasha was well aware of our split. I'm curious what Nastya said to him. But what do ex-wives say in this circumstance? I wasn't a woman before love, not before love murdered me. I've had enough snot. The past is irrelevant, as Changdokguk the large snake stated. I was released 2 weeks later. Nastya attempted to visit me twice, but I declined. The past was irrelevant. I moved out on my own for the first time and leased a tiny apartment close to the clinic where I worked, starting to adjust to life alone. My reaction to my wife's separation was dual. Of course, there is the anguish of betrayal on the one hand, and then there are some, as of now, hazy prospects. There was just one thing I was certain of: no more relationships with women. It was difficult to immunize against new partnerships. Then came the divorce, leaving me without a wife as well as my support system. The kids adopted a neutral posture, although it was clear that they supported their mother's position more. Work. I resumed my operations. I made an effort to block off the pain at work. I was successful. I didn't drown myself in alcohol, as abandoned husbands occasionally do. 2 months later, I received a call from an old buddy asking to meet. Yura, you might recall that I took out a sizable loan from you a few years back. He initiated the discussion. I was aware of that. Sergei took out a very sizable loan from me 3 years ago. He was experiencing significant issues with his company, and he had no one to turn to for assistance. I had the cash since I had recently sold my mother's apartment. I didn't give my friend a deadline to pay it back when I gave him the money because I knew Sergei wouldn't be able to do so immediately soon. Sergei made his problems right, but he had no immediate need to repay the obligation. I understood that I would lose my friend if I inquired about the loan. Even my father once advised me to consider what I was offering a buddy when I borrowed money from him. And don't bring up the debt if you appreciate that individual. If he is able to, he will repay it when the time comes. I'd appreciate your assistance back then. I'm back on track now, and my business is thriving. Sergei went on. I placed your money in the company, and so far it has produced positive returns. He gave me a credit card. I owe you money plus interest. It's 5 times what you originally loaned me. Yes, it was quite practical. I bought a car and a small cottage for myself not far from the city. I hired an assistant since I didn't have time to do the chores. She was over 15 years my junior. She was a very young woman who had been married before. She had spent over 20 years living with her ex-husband. She couldn't conceive, therefore they never had kids. And finally, her spouse walked out and moved in with someone else. My neighbor told me all of this. Natasha herself didn't speak much about it. For her, I had no intentions. Just a helper, nothing more. It went on like way for almost 6 months. I once felt nauseous when I was cutting wood. I went into a severe headache and passed out. In the hospital, I realized who I was. Natasha was seated beside my bed. She was the one who dialed 911. She was seated with my head in her lap when the physicians came. I was good. Simply put, brain injuries are difficult to recover from. But after that occurrence, I started to see Natasha through new lenses, and it wasn't until recently that I truly appreciated how stunning she is. Our connection gradually grew more intimate on its own, and at one point I proposed to her. In the autumn, we were married. I felt free to make love to her since I was aware that we couldn't have kids. Natasha started to feel sick about 3 months after the wedding. Nausea and headaches. I brought her right away to my clinic. You can only imagine how shocked I was to learn that she had been pregnant for over 2 months. At the moment, Natasha said to me as follows: "Regardless of what you say, I'm keeping the child." I simply kissed her precious eyes while holding her close to me. I suddenly came to understand a fact. When one door in our path is closed by fate, another one is quickly opened. Regardless, things were getting better. Then, shortly before the new year, I gave Nastya a call. "We must meet." She spoke with a sort of pitifully pleading tone. "Please arrive at 7 o'clock. I reserved a table at a restaurant. I kindly ask." Nastya was seated across from me and appeared contrite and sorry. "Yura, I apologize. Never did I go a day without thinking of you." Tears started to form in her eyes. "I messed up miserably. I betrayed our family, our kids, and you." I remained mute as I looked at the lady I had once loved wildly while she spoke. I would gladly offer my life for the woman. The lady who had cruelly deceived me twice without hesitation. The person who, for a little over 20 years, lied to me. The woman who dumped me for another man and shut me out of her life. She had only recently regained her composure and was attempting to contact me again. Nastya said that she had just recently realized how much she loved me and that I was the only true guy in her life. She claimed that the time she had spent without me had made her understand how much she loved me. She somehow made me think of the siren from Greek mythology. Her lingering words led me to believe that I was the only one who could possess her heart. "I'm terribly sorry." She kept saying it like a spell. I also envisioned her kissing and cuddling her lover with it while I stared at her lipstick-covered mouth, which had just charmed my ears with such wonderful words. Did she really expect I'd take her word for it? That she was perplexed and unsure of what she desired? That it turned out she just loved me? And that's why this lady who cheated on me, had a kid with her boyfriend, left me, spent her spare time with another guy, and never thought of me, returned. She eventually came up with an explanation for her cruel behavior and immediately left me. She had previously enjoyed her lover's company in his bed, and she had coldly prepared the occasion to deliver one more lethal blow to me. She had nothing of worth left and was now offering it to me, but her boyfriend had already used it. He merely wanted her for pleasure, and as long as she had money, she knew that she couldn't have a future with him, and that she was on her own right then. She crawled to me when she understood what had happened in an effort to attempt to restore what she had lost. She must think I'm so naive that I'm willing to fall for all of her falsehoods. I kept quiet as I listened to her incredibly regretful analogies. To her, I had nothing to say. I didn't take pleasure in her humiliation or gloat, you know. I even had a human sympathy for her. We had been together for 40 years after all. However, we had to stop our encounter. My phone rang at that very time. Natasha contacted and inquired about my pickup location. After giving her the address, I bid her farewell. "Is that your woman?" Nastya was quiet and questioned me as her eyes were filled with tears. "Yes." "How long have you two been dating?" "Yes, it has been 1.5 years. It occurs." I stood up. "Hello, Nastya." Try to be joyful. "Leave the restaurant by leaving." I circled back. Nastya stood staring at me through the festively painted window while holding her hands close to her breast. People were hurrying and hustling all around me. Life continued. An ominous Coca-Cola advertising flashed in brilliant lights on the opposite side of the roadway. "Enjoy it while you sip it. They lie after trying it." I started the engine after getting into the vehicle. The engine chugged quietly and smoothly. After making a left turn, I quickly joined the constant flow of moving vehicles. That is the story, then. To ensure that you don't miss any new tales, click the bell and subscribe to the channel.